This video we're going to extend Excel's reach when using the Excel command action, as well as do something a little different by using Airtable as our data source and process log. This workflow represents an end-to-end solution, automatically providing an information packet to anyone filling out the form posted on a website. The premise is that a company with open positions in several departments builds a form in Airtable that is posted on their website. Visitors can fill out the simple form to request information about the department they're interested in, and the inquiries are captured in an Airtable table. The workflow retrieves the request from Airtable, passes them along to an Excel macro that opens a specific PowerPoint deck, customizes it with the visitor's name, and then emails it out to them. Once completed, Airtable is updated. Set up on a schedule, this can run completely autonomously, sending out information packets to anyone who visits the website and fills out the form. Let's get started. Here we have our Airtable base with our 3 tabs for this process. The main tab is the job requests, and these are where the requests from the website form are captured. I've already pre-populated a few names in here. Sue, Bob, and Alex. And the positions they're interested in are HR, IT, and executive. Now the second tab is requests sent. Any requests that are sent successfully are captured here. And any of the requests that run into a process error during the workflow will be listed here for follow-up later. Okay, so let's take a look at the workflow. Okay, let's start from the left and work our way across. So we start off with the import from Airtable to pull in that table we saw earlier from the job request tab. Okay, the filter I put in just for testing, I can pass through one or several to check that everything is working okay. Everything has been tested, so this has been disabled, but a handy feature to put in. So you have spots where you can test a few records to make sure it's working before you release everything. Okay, the next step is to iterate this email module, okay, which we'll come back to in a second. And we're going to pass in the name, email, and position. We are going to iterate and append results from the default table. And we're going to collect errors and continue. And you'll see why in just a moment. Okay, so let's jump into the email module since we're at this point. Okay, we're starting off with an Excel command action. And this Excel command action is going to run a macro called build deck in the file that we'll look at in a second. Okay, and we're going to pass in the position and the name. Okay, so this Excel file is simply a mapping table. It's going to take the value of the position that's passed in, and it's going to map it to the PowerPoint deck file that we're going to manipulate and customize to send back to the requester. Under the hood, this contains an Excel macro that is a function, and that function starts up the PowerPoint application, loads the deck that we're interested in, injects the requester's name and some customized text, saves it with a customized file name, and then shuts PowerPoint down, and then moves along to the next step. Okay, the next step is the skip actions on condition. So the return value from the macro will either be the customized file name of the PowerPoint deck to be sent out, or it'll be the word error if something went wrong with the Excel macro. So at this point, if we received an error back, we're not going to email and we're not going to clean up the file. We're just going to pass through the rest and return to the calling module. However, if it's not an error, we're going to pass on through. We're going to build an email, injecting the name of the position, the name of the requester. We're going to attach the file name that was output from the macro. Okay, and that will be sent out to them. Then we're going to clean up that customized PowerPoint file. We don't want a ton of PowerPoint decks building up on our hard drive, so we're going to clean it up as soon as it was emailed out. Okay, at this point, we return back to the main module. Okay, and the next step is going to be to add a column that lists the date that it was sent out, this report was sent out, so we can keep track of what was sent on what days. Again, I have a breakpoint in here for testing. When I want to test up until this point, I would turn this on, set this to break. At this point, everything has been tested, so this is set to continue. Another great kind of debugging testing tool to put into your workflow. At this point, the data set branches. So anything that was successfully sent, where that return value was not the word error, ends up here. If there was an error returned, it ends up down here. So along the top branch, we pull in the data set. We filter. If there were no iteration errors listed and the output value is not error, okay, we're going to go along. We're going to drop out the iteration errors and the output file columns. Okay, we're going to add that value. We're going to add that record to the report sent tab in the Airtable table. Okay, and then we're going to remove that from the original job request list, because if this runs on a schedule autonomously, we don't want to recapture that record and run it again, so we need to move it out of the job request tab. So it will only pick up fresh requests. In the bottom branch, again, we pull in the derived data set, except we're doing the opposite filter here. If there is an iteration error listed or the output returned is the word error, okay, we come down here. Okay, we're going to rename the column, the report sent column. Instead of report sent, we want to call that error date, because the report was not sent. It generated an error. This is the date it happened. Okay, we're going to drop out the output file because all it says, or the output column, because all it says is error. We know that. We're down in this branch. Okay, again, we're going to update the request errors tab in the Airtable table. Okay, and we're going to remove that from the job request tab. Again, we don't want to reprocess that at this point. Someone needs to research why this request went bad, why it generated an error, fix that, and then we can deal with that manually. So that is how the entire workflow runs. Okay, so I'm going to run this now so you can see it in action. If you keep an eye on the taskbar, you'll see when PowerPoint gets triggered by the icon lighting up. Okay, and it has completed. And you'll see, just from the output we have here, we have two file names, and we have one that was an error. Okay, we have no iteration errors, so there was nothing returned from EasyMorph itself. But the error was returned from the macro. So in that case, Sue Smith and Bob White's records moved up to the top, successful sending, and Alex's ended up at the bottom because he received an error. Okay, so let's take a look at the Airtable table. So we can see the job request tab is now empty. All the files have been processed. Okay. Sue's and Bob's are in the request sent. They were successfully sent. And we see the report sent date and which reports they got, which positions. And Alex's is in the request errors. And we can see we captured any iteration errors that may have been listed and the date it happened and which position they were after. Okay, and we can actually explore this and find out what the problem is. It's really easy because I set it up that way. Okay, you can't see it because it's behind the scenes, but I purposely named this file exec.pptx, so we would have an error that we could look at. So that was the problem. When it got to the macro, it looked for the exec.pptx file, could not find it, so it returned the value error to the output field, and that's what processed the error for Alex. And that is the troubleshooting that goes on. If you have a file name named incorrectly or you don't have a position listed in the table that someone is requesting, you'll get that error back to research. Okay, so that is the entire workflow. And really great idea for EasyMorph. It's more, I would say, in my opinion, it runs more like an RPA application than it does really an ETL. We're not really doing a lot in the way of transforming data or working with data. A few transformations here and there, some cleaning up, some filters. But for the most part, we're autonomously running a process that pulls in records from a database, and it could be any database that is updatable, like Airtable is, SQL Server, anything like that. And it's using Excel's macro engine to fire up PowerPoint. So that's kind of the reach of Excel. It's not just running an Excel macro to run something in Excel. Excel can then run PowerPoint and then come back to Excel and then back to EasyMorph. And it can do that with Access. It can do that with Word. It can do that with just about every Office application that supports VBA. So that is the workflow. Hopefully it sparks some ideas for other uses for EasyMorph than just pulling in data, crunching numbers, and then writing data back out somewhere. Just application manipulation is an awesome feature of EasyMorph. So that's about it. Thank you for watching.